Welcome to this very busy New York street. I'm here today to talk a little bit about New York this time of day, especially New York at night, and about a very special lens called the Nikon Noct, also known as the Nikon 58mm f1.2. This lens is really special to me. I've had it since high school. It's really been here since my interest in photography and filmmaking started as like a high schooler. But it's also become special for a different reason. It's gotten very valuable. It's gotten to be like a lot of film photography equipment, very expensive on the secondhand market. So this little film is kind of about my love of New York at night, my love of the Noct, what you can do with this lens. I think some really interesting like visual qualities of the Noct that come out, especially when you shoot it wide open, when you shoot it at f1.2. It's a very contrasty lens. You can get some beautiful tones. But besides all of that stuff, it's also kind of about the value we place on gear and how important gear really is. If spending a lot of resources on this older equipment these days is really worth it, and what about it is worth it. The Nikon Noct 1-58 is one of the most beautiful lenses from this review I'm reading right now. It has a 7-blade aperture and hand ground glass, which makes it kind of a unique lens because it was actually filed down by hand when they were assembling the glass components, as opposed to a lot of lenses that are made in a factory with, machinery parts. As I said in the beginning, it's very rare, so I think there's a lot of different ways to discuss this lens, but I think we can definitely say that it is a unique piece of glass, and I'm very excited to kind of jump into some of the details right now. So I think for this first section of our little photo podcast, I'm gonna call it Voyeurism Street Up Close, and I'm gonna start with this photo. I've gone back and forth on if I like it or not, but like this section of the video and like this part of the channel, I'm just kind of sharing raw work and seeing how it is and just saying how I feel about it without kind of holding back. So I didn't like this photo for a while. I felt like it was a little cliche New York somehow, but I think it actually shows a really interesting component of this lens, and that is what that extra 8mm does, just from like a technical perspective. And I was thinking about this, but like if you think about the difference between a 35mm and a 50mm lens, there's a 15mm difference between those two. So really, for 58mm, it's actually a decent leap. It's about half of that difference between 50 and 35. So I actually think that that extra 8mm gives you a lot of extra kind of zoom in. It gives you a tightness that's really interesting. And I think in this shot you can kind of see it, because when I was shooting this, I was like, it was in New York last winter, and I was by like a little salad shop, shooting this guy walking down the crosswalk. So I was a decent length away from him, but it feels very tight. And I think like the most interesting thing about this photograph is just the colors of the cars and the crop, like that purple Dodge, especially the way it's just out of frame and you see like these reflections. I think that that adds something, and I think on a normal 50mm it wouldn't be as interesting. You can also just see like what the Noct quality does. I think there's like a great contour to it. I mean, that's kind of nice, right? Just like having this much contrast and color, like from a completely available light photograph. I think like that, just like pure optic quality of the glass and like the contour really does help in this situation. Here's like some subway shots, shot outside of the subway window. I like this second one a good deal. But I think I'm just okay on them. I think they're kind of predictable New York shots again. That's going to be a theme in this series, because I think I just went for like more obvious subject matter when I was using this lens, especially for night photography, just because I kind of wanted to test the capability of it at night. But I think that both of these are solid. Both of these were shot at 1.2, wide open, at infinite focus distance, right? Because it's like shooting these buildings or cars off in the distance. And I actually think it's like pretty good for like 1.2. It's like totally in focus, for like something far away. Again, just like showing like what this glass can do when put to the test. And I think these last 3 photos really do prove that this lens is like fantastic for just fly on the wall style of photography. Like you can really take this lens anywhere at night and it's like solid. And then a final photo for this section. I'm not that big on this photo, but I like what it shows. I think it just kind of shows like if you wanted to do a more like conventional, like almost like getting in people's face style of street photography, what this lens could let you do if you wanted to do that style. And here's like, this lady got caught in a downpour and she's just kind of, stuck walking. And, if this was a Bruce Gilden photograph, of course I would be like right in her face. But if you do want to take these sort of photos, I think that, the Noct puts a very like poetic spin on it in a way. You're going to get like amazing color contrast. I just love like the detail in like the street potholes and the steam. It's just like very cool. I lied. There's a few more photos in the street series. I'll just share them quickly here. Here's another 1.2 photo, shot wide open. I think this one's a little bit of a failure because of course the cyclist is not in focus. It's like I focused at infinity. So the buildings in the far background are more in focus. But again, it's like a really interesting, just like color quality. To me, this photo, again, just shows like how good this glass is at available light stuff at 1.2. Like the contrast in the water, on the sidewalk, just like super intense, almost like Blade Runner, levels of like moody rain. So I like that one as well, just for what it shows what the lens can do, but I don't like it that much as a photo. And then I'll just share this shot quickly. Definitely one of the more noteworthy shots that jumped out to me when I first got this roll back. I think this one's pretty strong on the voyeurism quality, but again, just to like show what this lens can do when you're like using that extra 8mm as opposed to just like a 58mm focus distance. Like you really can get close on people and like capture these interesting moments. And like for this shot, I feel like I was almost a full like building away from them. I was not close to them at all. And I was still able to get like this pretty good crop. So part 2 of this little podcast is going to be on portraits. I'll just repeat that like I really like what that extra 8mm can do when it's a portrait style photo. These first few were all shot at 1.2. I worked with a great actor and model, Amber, to take these, and we first started playing around with like an old school style lighter. I was just curious like how much the lighter could like act as a key light if we were shooting like basically in pitch black. So this first shot was shot in the Lower East Side in Manhattan on a very cold day. It was way too cold to be shooting, but we shot nonetheless. And it was basically a completely dark alley. aside from like a few sodium vapor lights, just like street lamps that were just kind of illuminating the way. And, you know, I think, again, like, it really does show what like a well-made lens, you know, well-made glass can do at 1.2. I feel like you can totally see the contours of her face very well. Again, not my favorite shot photographically speaking, but like as a shot to show what the lens itself can do, I think it shows a lot of potential. The second one here was just of Amber, in like more of an uptown vibe. We shot this like near 42nd Street. And I mean, this is a pretty unique shot. It's not quite in focus. It's a little blurry. There's some motion blur going on as well. I think I was shooting at like 1/30th of a second because it was dark, but I was still wide open. And it's like, it's very interesting to see how like all the bokeh is like doubled almost. You get like that double exposure almost from like a slight motion blur. And again, like as a shot at 1.2, I think like the contour and the contrast is great. So another win for like using this lens in very like kind of spontaneous available light situations. But the shot that I really want to share from this series is the one we shot in 42nd Street, where Amber is like in front of the bus here. This is probably my favorite photo I've shot with the lens so far. I think like it's just a great use of the natural light of the situation. You know, this photo is like completely lit by sodium vapor street lamps, just available light that you get in like Midtown New York City. And then, you know, I think the lens is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It's showing like a great amount of contrast, and I think the 58mm again works really well for framing. It like blocks it very well, and it's just a great shot. I'm actually pretty happy with it, and I think that like, you know, the quality of the glass in this situation does like really help. And speaking of that, this is another photo that I'm like pretty happy with this lens. This was with another model. We were shooting more in like Jane Street. And yeah, it's again like pretty similar to the bus shot. It's like a available light situation. All of the photos I'm showing were shot with available light, but I just recall this being like a very dark street, you know, like it was just not lit at all. So I think we found a little pool of light just from like an overhead street lamp. And again, big theme for this video, it was shot at 1.2 again. But I'm pretty happy with it. And I remember I had a old photography professor tell me that like when you're doing this style of photography, like anything that's not like lit very much, you know, you're really trying to focus on the water in people's eyes. And that really stuck with me. And I think that's kind of like what's going on here is, you know, you just really get a good amount of contour and contrast just from the natural light and in her face, and it works great. I also love what the bokeh does with her curly hair, kind of against that red light. Again, I think they're like tail lights from cars up the street. But I really like how it just kind of, you know, compounds everything and like flattens it into like a really interesting composition. There's like kind of an outtake of that shot as well, like a little more dreamy. But again, I think it's like pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting what this lens can do just with like natural light. And then here's a few more pulled back. It is interesting doing like a long shot with this style of lens as opposed to like super close. I feel most of the shots I've shown so far are like close shots, but I like the quality of this lens when it's pulled back a little bit as well. Like you'll see on this one, Yeah, it's just not so tight. It's not like a conventional portrait. There's like just more headroom, and I'm like, again, with the crop of this lens, I'm a decent distance away. I think that Macy was basically standing across the street, and then I was on the other side of the street, and the framing basically makes it look like I was very close still. But I think when you're shooting it that way, when your subject is like a little bit further away, it also creates that really nice fall off, and it makes the subject super sharp. This was shot during a very hot day, and I just like seeing that contour on her face. The bag is kind of interesting. It just like tells an interesting story. And again, to me, like, this is a great argument for like investing in high quality glass, because it can make a difference. In this kind of shot, I really do see the contour it can provide, and I think it's like a really charming sharpness to me. I think that having a setup that's like truly run and gun, where you can like pretty much go anywhere with it, is what all photographers want. And I think like this is, to me, the best argument for this lens. If you really are legitimately considering buying it, or maybe you're like going after another similar lens for like a Leica system or something, like I do like a good 1.2 lens that is super high quality glass, because I think that it really can knock it out of the park sometimes and like give you really beautiful colors, even in like very kind of like mundane situations. And that's why like this lens exists in a way, right? It's called the Noct for nocturnal, and it was pretty much invented as like an available light lens, which is like a super radical concept if you think about it. I mainly work in filmmaking, and I think that like a lot of very high quality cinema lenses are like pretty much designed to work in like studios with like very high key lighting, and they might go to like 3.5 as like the widest aperture. So having like a tool that was like legitimately made to be like dark and kind of contoury and colorful, but like shady and just like very moody, is like a super fun tool to play with. So what is the point of buying expensive gear? Is it to satisfy the need of having a certain technique, or to be perceived as like using this specific tool, to like being able to say that you have it and that you're just like rocking it? I think it is kind of interesting that the Noct is like a plain black lens. It's not like that noticeable. It doesn't have the red dot or like a super recognizable design language like a Leica or a Rolleiflex. It's a harder lens to spot in the wild. It's probably not like a hype lens to the uninformed. So I think the beauty of this lens actually is that it's not so flashy. It's not like a hot commodity. It's not like a super hype, beautiful photography item. It really is like a practical tool. And I do think that like if you bought it at market value, there's obviously alternatives that are going to be more useful for like available light photography. I think you could replicate most of these results with any 1.2 lens, but what I would say is that I think that the 1.2 is very relevant here. Even if you're shooting at 2.8, most of these shots would not be possible. It is really special to have a lens that can pretty much open up all the way. And the great thing about this lens is, again, as I said in the beginning, the 7-blade aperture, the hand ground glass. This lens truly is designed for like just excelling in night photography and taking these very almost like marginalized mundane spaces and like putting a super colorful poetic spin on them. And I think that's beautiful, and I think it's like a really beautiful tool to use for that. One thing I've always wanted to do is a filmmaking video with this lens, like adapting it to a video camera, maybe my Sony that I'm filming this video with, and using it there as well, because I think that would be, I think it would yield really awesome results. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And, you know, I'm just going to say again, I think the Noct is a lot different than the Rolleiflex, because look, you look at the Rolleiflex and it's like a super recognizable item, right? Like, I love this camera. I'm making my next video about it, which is kind of why I'm showing it right now. But it is almost like this hot commodity. It's like super recognizable. Whereas there is actually something kind of charming about the Noct, that it's not that recognizable. It's not like super visible in a way. It is kind of a workhorse, despite the fact that, at least in some secondhand markets, it is like, you know, maybe twice as much as what the Rolleiflex even costs these days. But I do think that if you're able to get this lens or an equivalent 1.2 lens, and you really are interested in doing nighttime photography, I think maybe, unfortunately, it is a very good investment. I think that when I look at the best examples of this lens, I do feel like that 1.2 and the general quality of the Nikkor glass really does pull ahead. So that is my conclusion, is that it is totally worth it if you put it to the right use. And it's a lot of fun to use. So for anyone watching this, considering, or anyone that's into these style of photographs, I hope this helped a little bit, and I hope that you find a great low light lens that can open to a very wide aperture and explore the night yourself, you know, finding these poetic, kind of dark, moody moments, because it is a really fun way to move through the world sometimes. So